Anxiety is when your mind is out there, right? Anxiety is your mind worrying about the future, and you're so outside of yourself. What meditation does is it brings your mind back home. So it brings it back to you in a way where you're doing something with your mind that brings it back so that you're inhabiting this best friend, which happens to be your body.
Wow.
So your mind and your body are traveling through time and space together. And when your mind is outside of your body's not happy and your mind's not happy. When we bring our mind back home and allow it to rest inside that body, it's very happy. And your mind will calm down, your nervous system will calm down, and we can do this in multiple ways.
Through interviews from London to Los Angeles, I hope this podcast will inspire you to embrace your wild side. To keep up with my wild adventures, follow me at susielindow.com. You can also find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Enjoy the show. Hello, wild riders, and welcome to the Wild Side. I'm your host, Susie Lindow, and I have a very special guest today. Former professional actress Katherine Kitty Moore has been teaching yoga full-time for 27 years. She was introduced to yoga when she was broke and desperate, living remotely in a foreign country with an abusive husband and 3 small children, and needed a job. When offered money to teach yoga through adult education, she jumped at the opportunity, even though she had never taken a class. She simply studied a few books and began. Thousands of hours of training, 4 yoga studios in multiple states, 4 children, and many, many cats later, she continues to dedicate her life to the practice that changed hers. Known for her sense of humor, spiritual focus, precise cueing, and storytelling, she's a Sanskrit Yoga Sutra, a Sankhya philosophy geek who loves to share the wisdom and beauty of the ancient practice. She's a Para Yoga certified 4 desires teacher, a Para Yoga and Himalayan Institute 500-hour teacher, and a Yoga Alliance continuing education provider. Kitty is also the creator of Sadhana West Yoga Teacher Training and Yoga Immersions, and is the co-owner of 7 Gems Retreats, taking people on transformative yoga, breathwork, and meditation journeys around the world. Welcome to the show, Kitty.
Hi, Susie. Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad. Well, I have to ask you, what is your definition of wild?
So, I have to go with there's got to be an element of danger.
Ooh.
I think what makes something wild is that it feels unsafe. And it doesn't necessarily have to be physical danger. It can be something that's emotionally or mentally dangerous as well. But that's my definition of wild, something that makes you feel like you are on that kind of precipice of something.
You know what? That makes so much sense to me because given your fearless background, right, and reinventing yourself when you were a young mother, I can see where that would be part of your definition. And I bet you have all kinds of wild stories to tell.
I do.
Which is why we're here.
Many that I can't tell here. But I do have some that I would like to share.
Wonderful.
I do think that there's, every person has that opportunity in their life to do things that are wild. What that looks like for everybody is going to be a little bit different, depending upon what your normal is, right? Because we all have different everyday normals in our lives. And something that might be really wild for one person is not going to be really wild for another. But one of the reasons that I like taking people away on retreats is because it gets people out of their little box. It gets them out of that, that sort of complacent place where we all develop something that's very comfortable. And then you get them out of that box by taking them someplace where it's new. And parts of travel are always going to be uncomfortable. And it's an opportunity for people to kind of meet themselves in a different way. But we did have a trip recently that definitely had people meeting themselves in a way they weren't counting on. my business partner, Sandra, and I took a group of women, most of whom were in their 50s and 60s, down to Yalapa, Mexico for a 1-week retreat, a yoga and meditation retreat. And when we had booked this retreat, we knew that we were going there during the rainy season. Now, the rainy season in that part of Mexico is really just when things will get a little rainy in the afternoon. So you're just expecting that you're going to have sunshine and beautiful weather all day. And then late in the afternoon, it gets a little rainy for maybe an hour. And then everything's cooled off and you move on with your day. That is not what happened. So when we arrived in Puerto Vallarta, that night it was raining, just dumping out of the skies. The streets were flooded up to your knees. And we had made an arrangement with the women who were all coming in from different places to meet at a restaurant in the middle of Puerto Vallarta to give everyone sort of an initial dinner together before we got on the boat and went to Yalapa the next day. But in order to get there, we were literally walking up to our knees in the water, and they greeted us at the restaurant with big warm bath towels and wrapped us all up because we were soaking wet, and had our first dinner together. And I'm thinking, well, it can't get worse than this. So this is probably like the initial bad thing that happens on the trip. And then I have one
question. I have one question. So when you walked into this restaurant, were there steps up to it? Like, I'm trying to visualize it. And so it was dry in the restaurant. You were off the street. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we were off the street. They were a beachside restaurant, but you walked up to get into the restaurant.
All right.
So we were nice and high and dry once we were inside.
Oh, that's great. False security, probably.
Yeah, definitely. The next day was sunny. And we took the boat ride 50 minutes to get to Yalapa. And that was great. That was fine. And when we got to Yalapa, because all that rain had come down the mountainside, the place that we were staying had a saltwater pool that was fed by the ocean. But now all that ocean water had brought in the debris from the rain that had come down the mountainside. So the pool you just couldn't get in it. And they said, we're going to drain it. We'll fix it. It'll be a couple of days. And we're like, all right, we'll roll with the punches here. So already we're adjusting our schedule. And I'm checking my phone. And we know there's a storm coming in. But at that point, it was just a storm. But it said that it might get worse in the coming days. So we started adjusting what we were going to do with people. And almost by the hour, it was getting upgraded. So that eventually it's upgraded to a hurricane. And we're like, okay, what category and where? Where is it going to hit? So we looked at their projected thing and it was going to miss us, right? And it was only a category 1. So we're like, all right, we can deal with this. Fine. But in the meantime, we'll probably adjust our schedule a little bit more. And we were going to go to hike up into the mountains to this waterfall later in the week, but we thought, you know what, let's do it on Tuesday instead, because we might not be able to do it later if that part of the mountain is in bad shape from what's coming. So that morning on Tuesday, we got up. It's still a category 1. And we had arranged to have ATVs meet us in town after a 40-minute hike. And the ATVs would take us up into the mountains. And then we would do another 40-minute or hour hike up to the waterfall. Where we would swim around in the river by the waterfall, have lunch, and then come down the mountain. It was a great plan. That's not exactly what happened. So on our way in, it got upgraded to category 2. And we're like, all right, we're still okay because it's not going to hit until tonight. So we're just going to rock and roll. So we rode the ATVs up into the mountains. We did an incredible hike up to these waterfalls. We had to ford one little stream and 2 rivers to get up into the mountains where this waterfall was. The waterfall was spectacular. It was really great.
Were you able to see like clouds building because you're getting elevation? Are you able to see it rolling in as you're going up?
As the day progressed, it was getting progressively darker.
Okay.
And then we got up to the waterfall and the skies began to darken. And then the guide is checking his phone and it's been upgraded to a category 3.
Oh no.
And then it starts to rain. And as soon as it started to rain, now, for those who are unfamiliar, the last place you want to be, if you've got to get to the bottom of a mountain when it starts to rain, is the top of the mountain, because the water is now coming downstream and those rivers that you crossed are getting higher. So the guide just looked at us as soon as the rain started and said, pack up, we got to go. So we packed up, and he said, walk fast. So we're walking really fast, and then the rain started to get even heavier. And at one point, he just yelled, run.
Oh, my God. And so how many people were there?
That day, I think there were 7 of us.
7 people.
And
wow.
A couple of people had decided not to do that hike, so they were back at the place we were staying. So there's 7 of us plus the guide, and we are running down this mountainside, absolutely running down a wet, muddy mountainside. We get to the first river. It is a lot higher than it was when we crossed it first. And one of our people has neuropathy in their feet, so they can't feel the bottom of the river. And the river is really rocky. So it was very dangerous for them to cross. So we actually had to take time to cross, with one of us holding her on one side and one holding on the other, to make sure that she got across without falling down between the rocks. So we get across the first one, we run to the second one, and now the second one is way higher. We're holding our gear over our heads, and we're, holding on to our friend, getting her across the river. And we get across that one, and at that point, we take a deep breath because we're like, okay, we're good. And we kept running because the guides that were on the ATVs, their families lived on the edge of the river. So these guys have got to get home because they have got to go home and protect their families. So we're still running. We run all the way down to the ATVs. And if you've never ridden an ATV, they're really fun. But riding an ATV at top speed in the rain on a really swerving mountain path was unbelievably scary. So we're just laughing. At that point, what can you do? We're just laughing as we're going down at top speed on this thing, holding on for dear life. We're soaking wet. The rain is in our face. The wind is coming. It's insane. We get down to the bottom, and those guys just take off for their families.
Wow.
And we now have 40 minutes back to where we're staying. So we're running back to the place we're staying. And when we get there, it's empty because everyone who worked there has now gone home to try to, again, prepare for this hurricane that's coming in, which has now been upgraded to a Category 4, and it's heading right for us.
So it's an evacuation situation now.
Yes. So we are being hit head on, and there's nowhere for us to go. So we're stuck. So it was us, it was my little group of women, and 2 American women who were there to do like massage therapy and Reiki.
Oh no!
And we all
not very relaxing.
Yeah, and we all gathered in one of most of the bedrooms and things at this resort that we were staying at were 3-sided. So you were open to the elements on one side. So there were very few rooms that were enclosed in any way. And they hadn't had anything like this happen in that area in, I don't know, decades. So, so they were just not really prepared for this. And so there was one room where they, that had 3 walls and then glass doors in the front, but it was still tucked in a little bit. So we decided to get everybody in there once it got really bad. So we did a little hurricane watch at the beginning to watch it roll into Puerto Vallarta. We could see Puerto Vallarta in the distance. And we actually could watch the hurricane go across Puerto Vallarta and knock out the electricity as it went.
Oh my gosh.
So we just watched it darken all across the coast. And then it's all dark. And we know it's headed for us. And as soon as that happened, we went to the inside room and stayed there from about 6 o'clock in the evening until close to midnight as this thing just rolled over us.
Were you able to go up above the water, or were you a second floor?
This particular resort is built right into the mountainside. So there were 175 steps to go all the way up to the kitchen where you would eat in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
So all of
Beautiful.
so none of the rooms were right at sea level. They were
That's
all
good.
up at least 25 feet. And this particular room that we were in was, again, tucked into the middle. And it had glass paneling on one side. So when the electrical went out, as all the lines were knocked down, and then we could hear the poles snapping around us as the electrical poles snapped. And then we started watching pieces of the resort fly by the glass doors. So we watched the rooftops from some of the buildings just flying past us as the winds were picking up, because that's like 140 mile an hour winds. And so it was insanity. So the sound alone is incredible. And you would think that these women would be in that room freaking out. Instead, we lit a bunch of candles and started telling stories and playing games. And everybody was amazing. They were absolutely amazing. No one complained. Nobody freaked out. Everybody was just there to help and there to help each other get through the situation and make the best of it. So we spent the evening, telling stories, kind of like this. It's like, what's the wildest thing you've ever done? And we all just told those stories all night long and really got to know each other. And we waited because you could feel yourself be in the worst part of it as it hits you first. And then the eye comes and it's quiet and you think it's over, but it's not. So we knew that's what was going to happen. So we waited. And then sure enough, the wind starts to pick up again. And then it's not as bad the second time it hits you because it's already starting to die down from coming through the forests. At that point, the trees are breaking up the momentum. So by about 11:30, we were able to go out and see what was left of the resort.
Oh my gosh.
And we went outside. And we all had brought flashlights with us, and we all had our phones, and we were able to charge our phones up earlier in the day in case we lost electrical. There was just debris everywhere, absolutely everywhere. These beautiful palm trees that were outside my room that we had taken multiple photographs of because they were just so lovely were in absolute shreds. Half the roofs were missing on buildings, and the kitchen had just one, wall and then 3 open sides, and a quarter of the roof had blown off into another part of their resort, and everything that was in the kitchen was everywhere else. So
that's terrible.
So we just got people to a couple of rooms to spend the night together so that nobody was alone. And then waited for the first rays of light in the morning. And when the first rays of light came out, my first thought was, I don't want anybody slipping on the debris on the step. So, because it was, everything's wet and there's like leaves and branches and everything you could imagine, animals, everything. Yeah, so we got up in the morning and started just pulling debris off the steps so that people could walk on the steps, and got all the steps cleared. There was an electrical wire that had come down about 5 feet. It was now hanging about 5 feet above the pathway to the kitchen. And I took a broom and I brushed every single step, 175 steps, all the way up to the top. And then just started pulling debris out of the kitchen because I knew that these ladies, I don't even think we had dinner the night before because there was no time. So everybody was going to be hungry, and no one from town was going to be showing up because they were going to be busy trying to recover from what happened to them. And to be honest with you, we did go later the next day for a walk to see what had happened to the rest of town, and it was devastated. So all of the restaurants that were on the beach were in bits. They were in pieces, and the hurricane, the river had risen so high. The ones that we were fording on the way back had risen up so much that they had actually cut a swath on both sides of the river for about 30, 40 feet and just leveled everything that was in there. So yeah, it was wild. The whole thing was wild.
It's pretty amazing you guys came through it.
As soon as I got up to the top and started cleaning the kitchen, They all showed up and nobody complained.
Nice.
Everybody grabbed a broom or a bucket and just started cleaning. And we had that kitchen back in shape, except for the roof, which we couldn't do, by the time people came back from town later in the day, later in that morning. And we were all prepared to make breakfast and do whatever we needed to do that day, kind of thing. And at the end of this retreat, when we asked everyone what their favorite part of this retreat was, guess what they all said?
Working together.
They said the day with the hurricane.
With the hurricane. Oh, yes, yeah. Right.
And
the hurricane was the highlight.
The hurricane was the highlight. And it was, I think it was the highlight for everybody, because all of the little stupid stuff that you worry about on a regular basis, all of our little aches and pains and everyday worries, gone. Absolutely gone. When you're really confronted with something that's that powerful and that wild, all of this other little stuff just vanishes.
Right.
So, and you meet yourself in those moments, you know, it's like, how am I going to meet this situation? Am I going to meet this situation with fear, or am I going to meet this situation, you know, with a sense of presence and calm? Am I going to meet this situation and think to myself, how can I be of service to the people around me? Or is it all going to be about me? Right. And in those moments, everybody found what their go-to was to be calm and to meet the situation with the idea of, how can I be of service to the people around me?
That's amazing. It could have gone, I mean, one person going off the rails would have made everything difficult. But honestly, I think in that situation, even though I wasn't there, I think it's kind of a testament to you, because you were a leader and people look to their leaders for everything in a situation like that. And to me, it seems like you were able to stay calm, and so everyone else was allowed that moment to relax and just sort of take it all in, instead of panicking where you can't think. But I also love what you said about meeting yourself when you're in a life or death situation like that. That's pretty amazing, an amazing type
I think that's one of the
circumstance.
Reasons that people, I mean, you know, I know a lot of us, you know, unfortunately saw that video on Instagram or TikTok of that poor Italian woman who passed away on trying to climb Mount Everest. And I think a lot of times people seek out really dangerous situations because you get a rush from being in those situations. I don't think you need to seek them out. Honestly, life will offer you.
Yeah, it does. Unfortunately.
Yeah. I think there are safer ways to do that. Like I say, we bring people on retreats all the time. And even just going on a retreat to a place or to a country that you've never been to, maybe they don't speak the same language that you do. There's enough situations in doing just that make people have to step up and find out what they're made out of. I don't think we have to do things that are literally life-threatening in order to do that. I think just smaller challenges are a good idea.
Right. Well, stepping out of your comfort zone, whatever that is, always pays off in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. I mean, I like to be comfortable. I love my house. You know, I love coming home and being in this beautiful, comfortable environment that I've created for myself. But it's also, it's necessary for each of us to kind of get out there and do something that's a little bit different. And I'm about to head off to India next Sunday for 3 weeks. And I haven't been to India before. So this is my first time going there. I've been trying to get there for years. And every time I've tried to go, something has gotten in the way at the last minute and I haven't been able to make the journey. So this is the first time that everything has really kind of worked out to the point where it's going to be easy for me to make that trip to go over there and do that. And despite the fact that I travel a lot, going someplace I've never been before, and one that I know carries with it a certain amount of danger, especially if you're a woman traveling alone, I found myself making a much deeper preparation for this trip than I would for a lot of other trips. And it's going to be very interesting. I made sure that I have traveling companions on every step of this particular journey.
That's good.
Which is good. But I wish that everyone had the opportunity to travel. Because, obviously finances will keep a lot of people from being able to get out and do something, go someplace and go for the big trip. But here's the thing. You don't need to go on a big trip. You can drive your car and go someplace, do something that you've never done before.
Or take a bus.
Yeah.
Or the train or hike from your house, someplace you haven't been to before. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Going out into a natural environment for most people is a big opportunity for people to, again, just kind of do something that is feeding your senses in a way that brings you into the present moment. It doesn't have to be a life-threatening thing. It can just be something new. Mm-hmm. New things bring people into the present moment, and it really helps people to rediscover themselves. We live in our heads a lot. Mm-hmm. I think as a society, we live in our heads way too much. And now we're all carrying around a little device that keeps us there even more. People are on their phones now the majority of their day. And whether they're working on their phones or they're checking their emails or they're on social media, and they're constantly just in a very small headspace. Mm-hmm. And when we have an opportunity to go out and maybe just go for a long walk in the woods, even go for a long walk in a park, just somewhere that gets you out of your head and into the moment and give you an opportunity to do something new. Even going to a new restaurant, trying a new type of food, something that gets people out of that everyday space of the same old, same old.
There's also a phenomena that happens when your brain is experiencing something new. I really try to do something new because my brain will go into hyperdrive, and those are the things I remember. I don't remember the routine day in, day out. What did I do last Tuesday? But I remember if I went to a new place and had a different experience. And all of those things are harder. So you have to think and you have to be aware of your surroundings and your environment and all of that. And so there's a lot to be said for that. I like that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, we all can use a little wild in our lives.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Exactly. So did you have any other wild stories you want to share?
I do. It's a different kind of wild.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, a lot of people are talking about manifestation.
Oh, yes.
That's a very big thing right now for people. I mean, I think it's always been a big thing for people, but it just happens to be having a particular moment right now in various ways for people. And I just want to talk about something that happened to me that was a manifestation that I think was kind of wild. And when I first started doing yoga, I did not understand the significance of having a guru, right? A teacher. Just the phrase itself, having a guru, I was like, it sounds like you're joining a cult, right?
Yeah, right.
I was not interested in joining a cult. I was not interested in anything that, sort of smacked of that. And the word, I was unfamiliar with the word, so I didn't realize that if you go to India, people will talk about their tennis guru, meaning their tennis teacher.
Oh, sure.
So it just literally means teacher. I invited Manora Madalvia to come to my studio in Connecticut when I opened up a yoga studio there and teach Sanskrit. And when she did, at one point we were talking, she was there for a couple of days teaching. And we were talking, and I told her about my first marriage and the fact that it was a horror show for me. It was an abusive marriage. It took me a long time and an ocean to, put between the two of us for me to get out of that situation. And yoga actually gave me the tool set that I needed to do that because I really needed an opportunity to slow my mind down and to be able to examine my thought process and understand what I needed in order to be able to get myself out of that abusive environment. And it's not easy to leave an abusive relationship. And it's also very dangerous. So, so it requires a lot of forethought in order to get out because you have to have a plan and all this other stuff. And yoga gave me that. And I will be forever grateful, and I will be forever feeling the necessity within myself as part of my dharma in life, my soul's mighty purpose, to teach other people the things that I learned in order to be able to do that for myself. So when I was talking to Manorama about her teacher, and she spoke and she said, well, he is my guru. And we have this teacher-student relationship between the two of us that's a formal relationship. And I didn't realize that was a thing. And so I said, well, that's great. I said, well, I'm going to start looking for my own teacher. And she told me how to do that. And then she said, so how's your love life? And I said, well, I don't have one. I said, I just don't think I could possibly put myself in that situation again. At that point, it was 16 years, and I was in the midst of the divorce when I met her. And I said, I don't think I want to put myself through this again. I wouldn't even know where to begin with that. And she said, when you're ready, ask. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, when you're ready, ask the divine. And I said, for what? And she said, well, that's what you need to decide. But be specific.
Wow.
And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, well, if you at some point decide that you're ready to have another relationship, you have to ask yourself, what is the relationship that I want? Mm-hmm. Do I want to date people so that I can have some romance in my life? Do I want a serious relationship? Do I want a husband? Do I want a soulmate? What do I want? And she said, get real specific, because the divine will always give you what you ask for.
Huh.
When you sincerely ask, and you ask from that place of sincerity, the divine will offer you what you're asking for, but you have to be clear when you ask about what you ask for. So I thought about that for a while, and it took me a while to get around to it. But eventually I realized that I was ready to have a relationship. And but I was trying to figure out what was I actually going to ask for. So the more I thought about it, I thought, okay, I don't want a boyfriend, and I don't want to date people. I don't want to fool around. I'm not good at the dating scene, and my kids have been through too much. I've been through too much. I don't want it unless it's a soul connection. So I said, I've done a lot of work on myself, and I think I'm ready for my soulmate. If you think I'm ready for my soulmate, would you please arrange a meeting?
Wow.
And that's all I asked for. I just said, I've done work on myself. I think I'm ready. If you think I'm ready,
let's do it.
Arrange a meeting. Let's arrange a meeting. So,
wow.
And out of the blue, I get this invitation to go out to Colorado for the yoga conference here. I was living in Connecticut at the time. And to be clear, the Colorado conference had come up a couple of years in a row. I had no intentions of ever going to that yoga conference because nobody wants to go from sea level to altitude to do yoga, right?
True.
It's really a struggle. So I had never had any intentions of showing up. But then, and it's interesting, at this time, one of my students back there, my yoga studio was near Yale University. One of my students was a professor at Yale who was the head of a particular NGO whose entire purpose was to work on the media coverage of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Because it was very one-sided, and people weren't talking enough about how many people on the ground really wanted to end that conflict and work on making sure that the Palestinians actually had a life, because it was, things have been absolutely terrible. And this was 20 years ago. So they were doing a walk for peace. And there were religious leaders coming from all around the world to do this walk for peace in Washington, D.C.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So my student asked me, he said, look, any chance you could give the proceeds? And I suggested it. I said, look, I think this walk is a wonderful idea. I'll give you the proceeds from one of my days worth of yoga classes to go towards the walk. And he said, wow, wouldn't it be nice if we could get all the yoga studios in America to do this? And I said, well, if you want to do that, you need to send somebody to the Estes Park Yoga Conference and pitch it there and let people do that. And of course, I'm saying this without realizing what's going to come next. And he said, can you come to New York and talk to this group about
Oh my gosh.
So I went to New York and I talked to this group about that there. And they said, that's a wonderful idea. We think that's great. Would you do it? And I was like, okay, well, I've pitched this thing. So at this point, I'm going to have to do this because I wouldn't know who else to send. And
Sure.
So I said, sure. And I end up going out here to Colorado to go to the conference, something I would never have done otherwise. Yoga Journal were the people who were hosting this thing. And Yoga Journal was so on this. They were so excited about this walk for peace and this opportunity to get the yoga community behind something this big. So they had little placards put up on all the tables in the dining room that said, please help us fund this walk for peace, all this other stuff. And it was disaster. Absolutely disaster. And we're getting a sense of that now. This is a very polarizing issue. And no one could wrap their head around the concept of this being about peace.
Yeah.
So, and because no one,
That's too bad.
and this gave me an insight in the moment as to how yoga was being taught in the United States, that it was really being taught as a physical practice. And they were skipping a lot of the rest of the yoga practice that was all about right action, right? And we could not get people to wrap their heads around it. And I had two close friends with me who were really phenomenal yoga teachers, amazing women. One of them is a psychologist. The other one runs a large yoga school back in a teacher training program back on the East Coast. So they were there helping me with this, and none of us could wrap our heads around it. We were just stunned at the way people were responding. I got so mad that I finally said, I am going to lose it on somebody if I don't go and calm myself down. I need to go do a yoga class before I lose my stuff. So I hadn't planned on attending one of the yoga classes, but I said, I got to do this. I got to take 2 hours. I'm out. And I went and I took a John Friend class. And I sat right behind these two guys. And one of them was busy doing handstands and showing off for me. And he was obviously flirting. And it was really funny because I was totally not interested. But he was flirting away. And I'm just like, fine. And then during the class, I got partnered up with his buddy who was sitting next to him. And he and I did a bunch of things together. And then at one point, John Friend cracked a joke, and this guy turns around and smiles at me, and my heart just went, and it was like, wow, what was that?
I personally just got shivers, so just letting you know.
And I'm like, okay. So after class, I chatted him up for a couple of minutes. And I was so out of practice chatting people up that I was just like, chatted him up for a couple of minutes, and then he was like, see ya, and just kind of took off and went back to the ladies. And when I got there, I was all flushed, and they're like, what is up with you? And I said, I don't know. I just met this guy, and something tells me this is something, but I don't know what this is. And the next morning, he came looking for me at breakfast. And we talked over breakfast, and my girlfriend's hilarious. We're all in our 40s, and we were giggling like teenagers. And then he asked to take me on a walk, so we went for a walk. He found out it was my birthday, invited me out for dinner for my birthday. And to make it a long story much shorter, we've been together now for 20 years. This is my husband, Steve.
That's so great. I love it.
But here's the weird part, and this is the wild part. After we had been together for about 6 months, and mind you, he lives in Colorado and I live in Connecticut. And by the end of the weekend, I knew that this was something that was going to keep going. He was still in the, well, you live in Connecticut, I live in Colorado. How is this going to work? And then proceeded to call me and talk to me for 4 hours every night for a month. And then we ended up meeting in New York, and then flying back and forth, one of us flying back and forth for 3 years until I was able to move out to Colorado.
Amazing.
But about 6 months into our being together, at one point he looked at me and he said, you know, I asked for you. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, for several months before the conference, you know, because he had also been in a marriage for 15 years, like me, that ended in divorce, and then had to do some real work, right, on himself to prepare himself for the next relationship. And he said, for months, when I thought I was ready, I started saying this prayer every night. And I just said, I've done work on myself. And I think I'm ready to meet my soulmate.
Wow.
If you think I'm ready to meet my
so
soulmate,
similar to what you did.
Would you please arrange a meeting?
That's amazing.
Exactly what I said. It was exactly what I said.
Wow.
And then out of the blue, this invitation comes up. There was no way I would have come out to Colorado. No way. So
wow. That's right.
Well,
Manifest, people. It works. It does.
Be careful what you manifest.
Yeah, that's right. Do your research first.
Yeah,
that's right.
And she was right. She was like, be super specific with it and get down to real details.
Yes.
So, because we both laugh, because we both say, you know, there were a few things each of us left out.
Funny. And, well.
You know, over the course of 20 years, you're like, okay. So, be super specific about what you ask for. So,
that's right.
Yeah. But I couldn't be happier, and he couldn't be happier.
Oh,
20 years. So.
That's great. Congratulations on that. That's a very powerful thing. I do want to step back. I don't know if you have an answer for this, but when you were talking about how yoga gave you the tools to get out of your abusive marriage, could you share anything like really broadly about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for one thing, most people are significantly more stressed than they think they are. You know, if you're feeling the necessity every day to go home and have a cocktail as soon as you walk in the door, or if you need to get high right away, you're probably a lot more stressed than you think you are.
Yeah.
And most of us are kind of walking around with a lot of tension in our bodies all the time. And that comes from the mental and emotional tension that we're under throughout the day. And for me, because I'd been in this abusive marriage, when I first started doing yoga, it was about 10 years into that marriage, I think. And the very first time I did a yoga practice. And again, this is another thing. I had no intentions of ever doing yoga. I was a professional actress and I'd never actually, I think when I was in high school, I went to an arts high school and they had someone come in and do one yoga class with us or something when we were in the dance department or something. And I had no recollection of what that person actually did with us. So this was a completely foreign thing to me. It just so happened that I got the opportunity. I wanted to teach acting when I was overseas, and nobody signed up for the course. And they said, well, we need a yoga teacher. Could you teach yoga?
It was meant to be, though, Kitty.
Yeah. Well, definitely it was. So I just grabbed a couple books and read the books. And then the first night I did a yoga practice, I remember laying on the floor at the end of the physical practice and feeling my body relax in a way it hadn't in a decade.
Oh, wow.
And then sitting up and doing some simple breath work and a quiet meditation. And at the end of which, I just started to weep.
Oh. Because
I hadn't quieted my mind.
Right.
In so long that it was a homecoming in a way I can barely describe without getting super emotional, which I will.
Wow. Oh.
And for most people, they don't realize how far outside of themselves they're living until they have that homecoming. And this is why, I emphasize when I work with people on relaxation and breath work because it's your way in. It's your way into that stressed body and that frenetic mind. And when we do meditation with people, most people will tell you, I can't do meditation. My mind is too busy. I can't quiet it down. But most meditation techniques take that into account. Mm-hmm. We don't really want you to try to make your mind stop thinking. Your brain is designed to think. It likes to think. So instead of saying, I'm going to stop thinking, give it an occupation. So Kriya meditation are meditations in which you do an occupation with your mind. Maybe you're doing japa, where you're going to repeat a mantra inside your head, and you're using a mala, right? Mm-hmm. And you hold the mala in your hand and you move the hand. And this gives you, I'm going to pull a mala out.
So we know what a mala is.
Yeah.
By the way, everyone's mantra should be, I am so good at what I do. Every day, say that to yourself over and over and see how you feel at the end of a week.
That is true.
Right?
There's power in that.
It's true.
There's absolute power in that.
There is.
This is the mala.
Oh, okay, the beads.
Yes, and you would hold the mala. This is just one form of meditation, and there's so many. And for japa, you would hold it in your hand, and then you'd say the mantra inside your head, and then you move the bead. So you'd say a mantra, and then pull a bead. Say a mantra, pull a bead. And you're doing this silently in your head, and you're resting your hand in a position where it's comfortable. So you're using up whatever excess energy, kind of nervous energy you have with the simple movement of your hand, and you're giving your mind an opportunity to focus. So instead of anxiety is when your mind is out there, right? Anxiety is your mind worrying about the future, and you're so outside of yourself. What meditation does is it brings your mind back home. So it brings it back to you in a way where you're doing something with your mind that brings it back so that you're inhabiting this best friend, which happens to be your body.
Wow.
So your mind and your body are traveling through time and space together. And when your mind is outside of your body's not happy and your mind's not happy. When we bring our mind back home and allow it to rest inside that body, it's very happy. And your mind will calm down, your nervous system will calm down. And we can do this in multiple ways. Sometimes we have people do specific visualizations where you'll visualize the breath moving up your nostrils and into the center of your brain, and then back down the other nostril. So you'll do an actual visualized movement on your breath so that you're connecting your mind and your breath to an action. And this will help people to calm their minds down. And over time, when your mind is really calm, when you've done these things, then you can do contemplation. And contemplation is when you follow a thought process. And for me, it was important to break down the ideas that were keeping me in this abusive marriage.
Oh.
And anyone who's been in an abusive marriage will tell you, who's been in an abusive relationship will tell you that, first of all, when you're in one, it takes you a long time to admit that you're in an abusive relationship because it doesn't start that way. It starts out as a grand romance and then ends up as an abusive relationship. So by the time you're, really in a dark, dark place, you have a lot to unravel. And for me, a lot of it had to do with ideas that I had been brought up with. The idea that the worst thing that a mother could do would be to take her children away from their father. And I needed to break that one down to figure out, A, is that true? And the answer was no. The worst thing you can do for your children is stay in an abusive relationship and demonstrate for them what they should expect in a relationship.
Yeah, because
For
it's
your-
not healthy.
You will, if your husband is being abusive to you, you will demonstrate for your sons that that is how a husband relates to his wife. You will demonstrate
Right.
to your daughters that that is what they should expect from their partners.
Right.
So the worst thing you can do is actually stay in an abusive relationship. And then I'm thinking, so where does this idea come from? Where did that come from? Why were people saying this? And then I had to break down ideas of patriarchy.
Oh my
Right?
gosh.
And so that, especially for women of my generation, we were raised in ways that were extremely deferential to men, extremely deferential. But in ways that were harmful on every level to us as women. We were told not to interrupt men when they were speaking. They could interrupt us, but we were not to interrupt them, right? And because of that, entire generations of men, and studies have shown this to be true, will always think that women are speaking much more in any conversation, especially at work, than the women actually are.
I didn't know that they had studied that. That's very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure that's true.
Yeah, most men in my generation will think that women. I think the statistics on this are astronomical. It's really kind of crazy.
Wow.
But if women talk 30% of the time in any business situation, all of the men in the studies said that the women dominated the conversation. At 30% of the
That's so terrible. That's so terrible.
So there were so many things that I had to break down for myself that were ideas I had about what I should expect from a relationship. I was one of those people who, my relationship to the divine has always been strong. And when I stood up in church and made a promise, for better or for worse, that meant something to me. So in my head, I had made a promise to the divine, not to my husband. I'd made that promise to the divine. And I was really having a tough time with leaving that marriage because of that promise. And then I realized that men wrote those vows.
Oh,
and I was like, wait, when you break those vows down, they're not designed for the benefit of women and children. They're designed to keep women and children as the property of men. And for better or for worse, that never works out for women. As a matter of fact, if a woman gets sick, and again, I'm just going to throw statistics at you. If a woman gets a life-threatening illness, she is very likely to have her husband leave her.
Wow,
and if a man
very
gets
sad.
It is very sad. If a man gets a life-threatening illness, he's very likely to have his wife stay with him to the very end. And when women get divorced in their lives, or if they're widowed, if we get widowed, we don't remarry. Women rarely remarry after they're widowed. Men almost always remarry after they've been widowed, because their lives are easier when they're married, and women's lives are harder. Now, I'm a happily married woman.
I know. We have to remind everyone that.
I'm glad to be married.
Yes.
But the reality of this situation is that for a lot of women, marriage is a difficult proposition, because we're still expected to do so much more than men are in those things. Now, this is rapidly changing. Younger people are changing the game in terms of all of this.
I love that.
And bless them, because men and women deserve more happiness in their relationships. And because a lot of these strange ideas of patriarchy, which not only were not working for women, but were not working for men, are being broken down now, those relationships are much happier, and people are going into relationships with different expectations. And it's a good thing. And yoga gave me the tools to slow my mind down enough to be able to examine all of the ideas that were not serving me and were not serving my children and to understand what I needed in order to build my own self-trust back up again and my strength, so that I knew that I could stop listening to all of the things that my abusive husband had said to me for the past decade, that had torn down my sense of self. I had to rebuild that sense of self. And yoga gave me an opportunity to befriend my mind again, so that I could hear myself say the things that were problematic and go, wait, no, I'm going to reframe this, and work with my mind in a way so that I could really begin to say the things to myself that were much more helpful. Because it's not really about things being good or bad. They're either helpful or not helpful. And just like you said a few minutes ago, if you woke up every single morning and said, I am so good at what I do for a living.
Yeah.
I am rocking this, right?
Right.
If you did that every day, yes, your brain hears you saying that. It's a repetitive thing for yourself. And eventually your brain goes, I am good at this. You know what I mean? It's damn. It starts to feed you that. And that is working with your mind. That's what's working with your mind. And this is what, I am emphasize with people, is that we do have the power to befriend our mind, and we do have the power to change our habits. Our habits are simply learned mental patterning. And once you recognize something as a pattern, you can break the pattern.
Right.
So
face the fear.
Yes. Yoga gives you the tools in order to be able to do that. Through the examination of things like the yamas and the niyamas, which are the abstinences and the observances of yoga. Simple principles. I'm actually writing a book on this right now.
Very cool.
But these principles are things like non-harming, non-lying, non-stealing, moderation, and personal responsibility. There are things like embracing non-hoarding. That's something else in there. And then just embracing different aspects like contentment and purity, which is not the kind of Western purity nonsense that people talk about, but more about cleaning your mind and your body from things that are toxic to it.
Sure.
And from things that keep you from being able to feel your best and have clarity. So that's what they mean when they say purity. Right? It has nothing. It has no sexual connotations to it. It has the idea that when your body is running efficiently and cleanly, and you're not constantly gunking up the works, you have an availability to the subtle energy that exists within you in a way that's very different than when your body is all clogged up with things, and it's very difficult because it's working its way through layers of discomfort. Same thing with your mind. When your mind is cluttered with ideas that are unhelpful and with ideas that make you anxious or fearful or sad all the time, again, then you don't have access to the light and the joy and the presence. So by examining these concepts, these simple concepts, and just taking time to write about them, you can do little essays about them and ask yourself simple questions like, how am I doing when it comes to things like non-stealing? And if you actually sit down and examine that, then you discover some interesting things. Most of us think we don't steal from ourselves, right? Because it's like, how can I steal from me, right? But we steal from ourselves all the time. When we say things to ourselves like, ugh, I'm ugly, or, I'm so fat, or I'm too skinny. Every time we say something like that, we're stealing from our self-esteem. When we stay up really, really late because we're anxious and we don't get the sleep that we need, we're robbing ourselves of rest and clarity. So there's a lot of ways in which we actually steal from ourselves. I know you as a parent. You're an incredibly generous parent.
Oh, thank you.
But
so are you.
Sometimes to a fault, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And we can often deny ourselves by giving away too much to other people. And so we rob ourselves of our own comfort by giving away more than we actually should. And again, that's one of those things about being a woman, is that we're often trained, one of the nicest things you can ever say about a woman is, oh, she's so selfless. She's so selfless, right? If you think that one through, that's not a compliment. Okay?
You need a little balance in there, I think.
Yes, we should all have a very strong sense of self. The idea of always putting everyone before you and never, because that's what being selfless is. Selfless means you never put yourself first.
Yeah.
And that's a really good way of having a short and miserable life. And for millennia, women did have short and fairly miserable lives.
That's so true.
So nowadays, really kind of examining these ideas, taking the time to actually sit down and work with some of these ideas helps us to have much more sense of self, much more sense of clarity, and really understand the places where we trip ourselves up. And if we're kind about it, and there's a reason that they make the very first practice of yoga, right? If you read the yamas and the niyamas, you realize that they start with the concept of ahimsa. And ahimsa means non-harming. And if we ask ourselves, are there ways in which I'm harming myself? Most of us don't consciously try to harm ourselves. But again, if we listen to the self-talk, if we listen to the little tape that plays in our heads when we are challenged. So this goes back to the ladies in the room during the hurricane.
Sure.
Right? Everybody in that room was being challenged. Right? Fear was coming up for everyone. So what was the go-to? They could have freaked out. They could have gotten angry at me for bringing them to Mexico. And honestly, that is one of the big go-tos for most people, is that they will turn their fear into anger. And they'll either project it out at the people around them, or they'll turn it inwards at themselves. I'm such an idiot for coming here. What was wrong with me? Blah, blah, blah. Right? And no one did that. And part of that was because, a lot of these ladies are committed to this very practice. They're committed.
I was going to say, I can't wait to read your book. I hope you get that out soon.
Yeah. Yes. So these are the kind of things actually that I do work with people on individually. I run workshops for people to dive deep into some of these concepts.
Excellent.
And we do the same thing when we take people out on retreat. We'll have a theme for the retreat. And we'll work through some of that with people. And it really depends on who's coming on the retreat. So we do take really a close look at who's coming on the retreats with us. And then and oftentimes they don't even know we're doing it, but we'll do specific practices with them that are very enlightening for people.
That's so cool. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
Everyone can do some form of meditation or guided relaxation. And even if they think they're totally incapable of doing it, trust me, if I could find my way in, considering where my really wild brain was when I first started this, you can do it.
I love that.
If you haven't found that place yet,
let Kitty help you find it.
I'm happy to do that with people actually one-on-one.
Yeah.
And people can contact me at kittymooreyoga@gmail.com. And I am really happy to work with people one-on-one. And just like nobody's going to want to wear the same outfit or live in the same type of house, not everybody's going to like the same type of meditation. So it's important that the kind of meditation that people do fit their personality. So
that's interesting.
I will happily help people find the type of meditation that will work for them. And sometimes you don't start there. You start with a deep relaxation and let people begin in a place of just learning how to relax themselves. And from there, they can work their way into doing some form of meditation. But I have a lot of upcoming workshops and things and retreats. I'm doing a retreat to Greece in June, the first week of June. So if anybody's got that wanderlust going and they want to come, rock on with us. But there will be workshops that are both in person and online. And I do work with people one-on-one as well.
And do you have a website as well?
I do. There's a couple of websites, actually. If people are interested in our retreats, it's the number 7 gems, as in gemstones, 7gemsretreats.com. And you'll see our retreats up there. Currently, you see the Greece retreat up there. And then they can also go to, at the moment, they can go to hiddenyogastudio.com. And I'll post up some things in the next couple of days up there for upcoming workshops. And then there will be another couple of websites showing up as we build out a program that, again, my friend Sandra Harper and I are putting together, teaching people all about different aspects of yoga practice.
Fantastic. Well, Kitty, it's been so much fun having you as a guest today. I have to mention, by the way, that Kitty is my son's stepmother-in-law, so we've actually known each other for a while. I have a deep respect for what she does, and I think that you have a lot that you can share with people, and I think they'll really enjoy working with you. You'll be able to find her information down below the video. I'll make sure to post all of that. And in the meanwhile, thank you so much, Kitty, for being on the show today. Thank you to everyone out there listening. Production and musical score of The Wild Side by Kelly Lindau. Visit my website at susielindow.com. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram, or tweet me about the show at Susie Lindau, and I'll follow you back. If you enjoyed The Wild Side, be sure to tell your friends, family, or anyone who will listen. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Thanks so much for listening.